Interesting, part of my photography is thinking about the different areas I've covered with the work. And I guess what every 5 years, it seems, in the last, well, 72 I went through a sort of a crisis about my work, and then in 77 I went through a crisis, and this is 82, so it's 5 years later, and I'm going through another crisis again about it. And I speak of it in crisis in terms of um, that what happened in 77 and what happened in 72 was there was a market change in my work. It was not so much a change in attitude, but a change in what I pursued with it, and, and how I went about pursuing the next level of work that I was going to follow. And right now I'm going through that, and it's interesting to me because one of the things is that as you go through these crises, for me they've been pivotal in that, important work has emerged after every one of those things. It's really important to me because depending on your age at the time, like when I was in 72, it was 10 years ago, I was 30. So to some degree I had some experience behind me, but it was not a great deal of experience, and so I'm talking about life experience, and so the work, there's some work that's real important, but in 77 it's even more interesting because I'm older, and at that time I had brought certain ideas together. There was a gestation period that had occurred, and certain ideas began to, they matured, and I understood them on a more cognizant level. Well, now that I'm 40, I turned 40 last August, and I've been going through this whole cycle again. The thing is, though, that this time, I understand all those ideas that I had before real well, but the problem I'm running into is that I'm not as clear, or I have not as many hints about the next level of work as I did 5 years ago. So I think it's really important because when you talk about photography, basically what you're talking about is you're talking about ideas. You're talking about how people work with certain ideas or how they work with certain life experiences. And this is a big generation, I would say, a big generation gap between people at my age and photographers in their 20s. You take young photographers in their 20s, they've only been adults for, maybe 5, 6 years. As a result, their life experiences, even though they might have traveled a lot more than I did at that time, they have not coped with many things. They have not had to deal with many things as a result. I think what you see with young photographers is a lot of contrived synthetic imagery or synthetic ideas because they feel the pressure of having to produce artwork, so-called for classes and for whatever else they do it. As a result, a lot of those ideas are real artificial, or sort of they're really contrived. Where when you get to my age, you've had the opportunity. You've had 20 years or 25 years of adult living. You've had an opportunity to really experience some things on a first-hand level. And to me, that's where the basis of my work comes. That's the genesis of my work, is what those experiences are about and where they're leading me to. The problem is that as long as you're kind of comfortable, and by that I mean that, you've had a modicum of success and you've also been dealing with things that are close to you, and there's been some acceptance for that. The problem you get into is that you get comfortable. And anytime you're comfortable, you're not really growing. And so I feel perplexed in two ways about my work at this junction right now, and that is that, one, I'm real happy with what I've done, and I know that it's important, but the other problem is that I'm really a person who likes to peel away another layer on the onion, so to speak, and I want to find a new level of growth, and, and they become more difficult to come by, I think, as you get older, because there's only so many layers, and you just can't peel them back as quickly as you'd like to. And so I think in terms of my work, I'm pursuing a lot of ideas, and I'm pursuing certain things that are traditional that I've followed for a long time. But in another aspect, I've also got some anticipation and some anxieties about the fact that that there isn't a great upheaval, and that the changes aren't coming more drastically or quicker, and yet I realize that there's a certain amount of that is just the nature of things. The Richard Nixon series is an interesting series because it was my first time to deal in a satirical way and to some degree a humorous way with the historical events known as Watergate. And the idea came to me fairly quickly because I had been watching so much television in regards to the Watergate hearings and to the effect of Watergate on the presidency. And I tuned in on the fact that what was occurring was that there was a change occurring which was not in step with the normal procedure, and that is that in politics you create an image. In this case, the image was Richard Nixon and the ideas that he stood for. And then that image is, you carry it through the presidential office for 4 years. At the end of 4 years, you either reinforce that image by re-electing it or you get rid of it. Now, the problem was that once Richard Nixon got into the second term, the problem was that that image then stepped out of line, and in effect that whole image was going to be replaced but not in a traditional 4-year cycle. It was going to be replaced very quickly in a very fast-moving event, and the implications of all of that. And so I became aware that our society, the American society, is very geared to images which have a certain built-in time slot. And at the end of that time slot, you get rid of them. Either you throw them in the garbage, or they wear out or whatever. But in this case, what were we going to do with that image? And so what I did was I sent away for an official portrait, and I was supposed to get 4 pictures for $2, and they sent me 10. So I guess they figured they were trying to get rid of the surplus that they had. So I got these pictures, and I mounted them on this cardboard, and I cut it out, and then I attached it to a long stick, as you see here. And what I did was I would go someplace and see a scene in which there would be ordinary people and say, well, what would happen now if Richard Nixon was in that scene? So I would give people a mask, and they would hold it up. I'd say, hold the mask like this. And I would go back and take a photograph. And what it did was that it took the image and it placed it in an environment that, you normally wouldn't you wouldn't associate that image with. And it made people deal with that image. So anyway, I did a series of 16 photographs, and I used my kids for a lot of those images. And I also used a lot of strangers. And I had 10 of the masks, and at one point we were going to do a group portrait of 10 people nude, all holding this mask over their face. And it got too cold, so we didn't do it. By that I mean people got cold feet, and they didn't do it. So, but it was one of the first times that I ever did photography that where there was some humor in it, and where it was a lot of fun for me. It was not. I didn't feel a whole lot of pressures like I normally feel about what I'm doing photographically. Did my first barrio photographs in the spring of 1973, and throughout I wasn't sure I could do them initially. By that I mean I knew that technically I could do them, but I didn't know if I would have access to get into the people's houses, because even though I am a Mexican American, the point is that I had not grown up in those barrios in Tucson. I had grown up in Phoenix in a white middle class community. And so even though I spoke the language and understood the culture, there was some question in my mind as to whether I would have entry into those homes. And so I went out at first with the idea that I would see what would happen. And I found within the first week that I had real easy access into those homes. The people were a lot more trusting than I had thought they would be. And I guess part of it was my ability to communicate in Spanish, but another part of it was the fact that I was not removed from the culture so much that I wasn't able to empathize and wasn't able to well, basically to be part of the group. So when I went into the homes, my first photographs were interesting in that it was almost they were almost snapshot-ish. Like I understood a little bit of the environment because I had seen that environment when I was a youngster growing up in the barrio when I was very young, but at the same time I was also dealing with a sort of a structural or design component and trying to put the photograph together, and also dealing somewhat with the psychology of relating to the people. So the first set of barrio pictures, there's 19 in the first barrio group, And of those 19, there are 10 that I feel are very strong and 5 that are very, very strong that I always include some of my best work. And I did that from 73 to the fall of 74, and then I exhibited that work and didn't really go back into the barrio until 1977, 3 years later. Now, when I went back in 1977, I was, at that time, I was being supported. By that I mean I had a grant, and I had a grant which is an endorsement of financial funds, and it was also an endorsement of other people saying that the work was important. So when I went back in 1977 to the barrio, I had a much stronger idea about what it was about, and I knew that I wanted to work in color because the first barrio pictures were done in black and white. And the reason they were done in black and white is because I've always enjoyed black and white, and also because there were some constraints, financial constraints in the beginning, that I didn't have that kind of budget. But when I went back in '77, I had what I thought was a huge budget, which was $6,000. And when I got through working on that project for a year, I was $1,500 in the hole. So the money was very helpful, but it just to give you an idea, I spent close to $4,500 just in processing supplies and in film for the series of photographs I made for the Espejo project. Now, I also was making black and white, but primarily my concern in 1977 in the barrio was dealing with color and dealing again with with the people, dealing with the psychology of the people. But I would separate those two segments of work in that the barrio basically dealt with the people in an environmental portrait. The second group of pictures, which comes in the Espejo project, 1977, 78 through 79, deals with more of the feeling about the barrio. It does include people, it does include close-ups of interiors and so forth, but basically what that deals more with a cultural aspect, deals more with a feeling about what it means to live in the barrio, or what the barrio is about in a sort of a spiritual or spiritual, in a spiritual sense, and where the first group of pictures dealt more with people and things, and it was not quite as intimate or quite as intense. There's a little known segment of my work. I mean, little known because not many people have seen it. It's never been exhibited, in a good gallery or in a large show, and that is a series of nudes that I've done. And my concerns with form have a lot to do with my concerns for sensuality. By that I mean visual sensuality. I'm a very visual person, and when I go someplace, if I go to a grocery store, if I go shopping, I'm constantly looking at the human form, and I'd say probably 90% of my energy is being concentrated on the female form. It's just it's something that I prefer. I prefer to look at women's bodies as opposed to men's bodies, and to me, it's a whole visual pleasure. It's more of a visual pleasure than anything. I love to see the line in a woman's neck, or the line in the leg, or the line in the arm. And so in the series of nudes that I did, I was trying to do two things. One, I was trying to deal with form, and I had done that to some degree in paper cuttings that I had done, somewhat a la Summer or a la Bruget, who also did this. Quite a few artists did this in the 30s. And I was always struck by the beautiful sensuality of that paper when I photographed it, and began to see that there was not much difference in my mind, in my eye, between the sensuality of the curve of the paper and the sensuality of the curve in a woman's body. Well, the new work is I consider anything that I've done the last 2 years to be new. I know that a lot of photographers, like to feel that new work is anything they did in the last week. But my feeling is that most of the time you don't understand what work is about for anywhere from 2 to 3 to even as long as 5 years later you really begin to understand what that work was about. So the work I've done the last 2 years has been primarily with 35 millimeter. Now, I think, having worked with 2 1/4 90% of the time, and work with 4x5, and now working with 35, it's the equipment in this sense of the work is real important, because with the 120 and with the 4x5, the nature of the equipment in which I had to set up a tripod, I had to somewhat think the situation ahead of time. And not only that, but when I was working then, you don't really, you look at a ground glass. So if you're photographing with let's say with a Hasselblad, you're looking at a ground glass here, so the picture is being composed here. And so your eye goes to that. The camera projects in here. With a 4x5, again, you're looking at the back of the camera. You're not looking through the camera. Now, with a 35, I am, in a sense, looking through the camera, so it's a different psychology. It's a different way of seeing things. I guess what I'm trying to do with the 35, what I've been trying to do for the last 2 years, is to loosen up. It's real funny, but as I've gotten to this age now, I sort of feel, as I look back, that I wish I had been more risky. I wish I had taken more risks when I was younger. I wish that there's a lot of things. I wish I had been more spontaneous. I wish I had been more willing to not plan things so much, not to worry so far ahead. So what I'm trying to do at this age group now is I'm trying to be more spontaneous and deal more with right now, this minute, in terms of what I'm doing with my life and what I'm doing with my photography. And so the 35 allows me then to be more spontaneous and immediate in that I can do it right now. On the Espejo project, one of the photographers had exposed 300 rolls of 36 exposure film, which translates roughly into, 10,000 negatives. I believe that's right. Let's see, my math is, it's about 10,000 negatives. And I exposed 47 rolls of film of 12 exposure, which basically is, I guess it's 600 exposures. And we both come up with the same amount of good images. Now, it's not a criticism of the other photographer, and that's not to say that I'm a better photographer because I use less film kit with the same images. It's just a way of talking about the different process working on. She's working with her 35 millimeter camera, and in a sense, she's editing in the camera, or she's working it through as she's photographing. She's clicking and advancing. She's working the idea through, where I'm sitting at home, days at a time, and wandering and writing and figuring out, where it is I want to get to. So that when I go out, in a sense, I have worked out a lot of that stuff in my head. Now, in retrospect, I realize there's two distinct ways of working, and I'm trying to work the other way. Now I'm trying to work more through the camera, although I find myself being stingy with film because of this other background. I don't think either way is better, because I think one's more spontaneous and one is more intellectual and thought out. But it's kind of, it's again, it goes back to what I was saying about my life now. I'm trying to balance things. I can get you all in here. Oh, you look good. That's you, Lala. I'm going to publish a book, and in 3 years they're going to look over here. Don't be shy. Yeah. I want to get you all. That's it. That's good. I'm going to publish a book, and it's going to deal with people from the barrio and people from Tucson. And now you guys are going to be in it because I took your picture. Okay. When you, I guess the main ingredient for me in being able to photograph in the barrio, even though, as I said earlier, I'm an outsider, is the fact that I still carry the culture. I still carry the seeds. I carry all of those things that are so important, that are formed in you at the early years of your life. And so I feel comfortable. It's really, to me, it's a pleasure when I go out and photograph. Some days I just walk around and I don't make a lot of images. But some days I don't make any images at all, but other days I see things and I feel things, and just being in the environment, to me, it's essential. I'm back into the element and back to the things that make a very important part of my life, make my days easier in a way. I guess, the big secret, again, that I really feel about the things that I've photographed is that I've tried to capture the spirituality and the religious aspect, and also what I call photographing an ordinary situation and making it more than ordinary, because it is more than ordinary. There's a sense of greatness, there's a sense of immortality. I mean, every one of us here, whether we make a big mark or a small mark, somehow we leave some traces, or we have some traces of greatness that attaches us to the rest of the the, the larger things, the larger events in life, and maybe just the little things that happen on a daily basis, the sharing, the understanding of what people go through in hard times and in good times, and those things are really important for me. We're really talking about an extended family in a real sense of the word, an extended family, not in the Hollywood sense or in the sense of everybody is this your brother or your sister or whatever. But I think really here people genuinely mean to help and mean to be involved with each other's lives, with each other's successes, and with each other's failures. And as a result, there's a lot of happiness and there's also a lot of tragedy that is shared communally. Some of that is changing with the younger generations, but I think there's always one element that remains, and that's the element of humanity, and the element that in the ordinary people that I see, and the ordinary people that I photographed, I always find something that's really beautiful for me, and that's that there's a sense of greatness in all of these people. It seems like every culture has this little thing that makes them, gives them a little tie with immortality or with greatness, something that keeps them going and keeps the situation and people around them feeling like tomorrow will come and today we're going to make it. Okay. Now this house is a very special house. I call this the Benitez suite. It belonged to a woman by the name of Benitez who lived here for a very long time. And about 6 months ago I came to this house and I knocked on this door, and I didn't get any answer, and I knocked again, and then after a while I noticed the door was open like this. So I looked in and I yelled, "Buenos dias, no hay nadie." And I yelled again, and I didn't get any answer. So finally I took a risk and stuck my head in, and then I could see as I went in that there was this dust all over this decayed room, and I didn't know if anyone lived here or if someone had been gone, but then I realized that no one could have lived here now. It wasn't safe anymore. It wasn't healthy. But there was something going on here that was just, my eyes were filled with the beautiful light and the spirituality, the religion, the kind of emotional thing that I had seen as a child and had felt as a child. And now as a 35-year-old man, I was once again re-experiencing those things and realizing that I was in the private space of another human being. And when I first entered here, I had that feeling. I still have that feeling. I've photographed here about 6 times. And I have the permission of the curator, the person, or the caretaker rather, who takes care of the place, to photograph here. I can get in whenever I need to. And then over a period of time, looking at the notes that I found on the floor, I traced down the woman to the place where she's at now. And I went to see her, and I showed her the photographs that I had done of this house. And she was very excited because she had been gone from this house for a long time. She's not coming back. And she gave me permission to do the photographs that I'm doing now and to continue to collect the artifacts and the notes. The notes are beautiful because some of them are just kind of a daily journal. I guess what they do is they take a minimal existence and they make it into a significant existence. There are also things that they're notes that tell you about the grocery list that she needed to buy things, or they tell you about the prayers that she said that day, or they tell you about making new coffee or listening to the radio. And they're like poetry. They're folk poetry to me. They're really important, and I sort of feel that the only thing I've really done is I've created some meaningful images out of a space that was created by another individual. So in a sense, I feel I'm just half the picture. I'm just half of the product. I'm not totally responsible for the emotion or the spirituality that people feel in the images. This place is so full of it that when I photograph here, it's just, it's just rich. I mean, there's so much to do. And I don't think, there's only 3 small rooms. I don't think that if I worked here some more, let's say another 3 or 4 times, I would ever run out of things. That's the problem, you see. But at some point I have to cut it off because otherwise, I'll just get loaded down with one thing. And I think at this point, the things that I have done have been enough to share with other people the imagery that I helped create, but mainly the imagery that Mary Benitez created here. And that's important to me, is that that person be given credit for what they have done. And that, again, is part of our culture and part of our humanity and part of being Mexican American or Chicano or just being human being. I think the photographers should approach two subjects last or after they've done photography for a long time. That's the nude and the landscape. The problem is many photographers, the first thing they want to photograph is the nude and the landscape, and that's the thing that they haven't worked out a lot of their technical problems as well as their psychological problems or their statement problems. And so when you're photographing, when I'm photographing the nude, I have a very definite idea that I know that this is a photographic situation. And when the model gets through, after she's been working with me one time, they generally, I have very few problems. They always want to come back and pose for me because they perceive that I allow them to be part of a process. You know, it's a creative process between the two of us, and it's a rapport that's strictly professional. Good. Good. Okay. Okay, now, when you look, look towards the camera. That's good. That's good. You were looking down like that. That was good. Look down like that. It's like you really were interested in the paper. That's good. Okay, that's good. Oh, wait a minute. Now, just hold that right there, because I've got a real nice spatial kind of thing happening right in here. That's very pleasing. I know it's tough to hold, but just hold it for two. Oh, these are some of the better ones we've had. You start on a real thin line, just a very short string, a small thread, and you begin to work with those concepts and those and what you see. It's a very visual, rich experience. It's a limited environment. You have control of the environment to a degree, but you're down to the very few elements. It's really tough. Very nice expression. And it always fits together. There's no such times as what you call bad times. Maybe you don't get a photograph out of the shooting session that you really like, but you get an experience, a visually rewarding experience that reinforces you for the next time. Because I have one more idea, and then I think, okay, hold it. That's really nice right there. That's really nice. Hold that. Okay, can you, what I want to do, though, is I'm going to move the camera forward, because what's happening is really happening where the body all of a sudden has become part of the paper and the paper has become part of the body. And the only thing that really is separated, that, is really man, and as opposed are the feet, and the feet are beautiful. Real nice. Real good. Okay, it looks good in the camera anyway. You never know till you get in the dark room. Then you say, why didn't I do this? Hold it. Okay, that's it. I guess I'd have to describe myself as a young man who's been photographing with a camera that's allowed him to get an insight, somewhat of an insight into myself and into people around me, and that it's shown me that my upbringing and the people I've come into contact with have been kind, and they have been good to me, and they have been human. I think the camera has brought this out. I think I'd have to say Lou Bernal, human being, photographer, involved with himself and involved with the people around him. As a photographer and as a Chicano, I feel I have an obligation to my community to photograph and to produce images that deal with the culture which I come from, the culture which I have inherited. I have been fortunate to travel throughout the Southwest and various parts of California photographing in the various barrios. And each barrio, of course, is different, having its own name and its own identity. But The similarities have to do with tradition, they have to do with family, and they have to do with an attitude and an aesthetic about life that is peculiarly Chicano, that is peculiarly Mexican-American. And I find that this culture deals with the aspects of familia, it deals with the aspects of tradition, mysticism, spirituality, and that there is a convivencia, or convivir. And this means to share or to live with someone. And as part of our culture, we share not only with the family, but we share with our community. And we also are wanting to share with other people. And so these are what my photographs are about. It's an effort by me to share with other people, to become a bridge between cultures and to allow people to interact and allow people to see what it is we have as minorities, but also what we have in common. I guess I have to describe myself as a photographer primarily because photography allows me to deal with the things that are very quickly moving, very quickly changing. A painter can synthesize. I synthesize, but at the same time, in the process of synthesizing, I'm in the environment, and when the environment moves and when things occur frequently, they occur in a way different than what I anticipated. And so as a photographer, and through photography, this enables me to go back to my ancient roots, in a sense, the traditions that I've learned as a youngster and growing up, and to make new visions, visions about myself and visions about where I come from, and hopefully visions for the future. When I went back to photograph in the barrio, I was looking for images that would tell me about the experience, would tell me about the experience as it was now. What I found were images that had been almost like in a time capsule that had been frozen, and frozen because they were images that were so advanced and progressed to a point that they dealt with the best of humanity. And so when I went into the barrio for the first time, I found images that were beautiful pieces of my past and were beautiful pieces of the experience that I and other Chicanos are sharing today. And this was the imagery that was a surprise to me, and yet it was also what I was looking for. I was looking for an identity in the images, and this is what I found. I found it much lusher, much richer, and more intense than I had ever anticipated it would be. I think you can take the boy out of the barrio, but I don't think you can take the barrio out of the boy. And so in terms of whether I remain as a photographer or I go on into other areas or whatever happens, in my soul, I will always be a Chicano. To the day I die, I will be a Chicano.